Hello, and welcome to the 80/40 Factor, where deeper conversations bridge generations. I am Nyna Gilpin, social media strategist and entrepreneur, and I am joined by my beautiful and glamorous co host, the
If
Diane
only.
Gilman.
Thank you.
Now, Diane and I are 40 years apart in age, but we have a lot in common. And one of those is we both moved to New York to pursue our dreams in fashion.
It's true.
So I moved to New York in 2010. It's my 15-year anniversary this year.
Wow.
And all I had was my two-door Honda Civic and whatever could fit in it.
Oh my God.
So, and you moved to New York, what, in the 70s?
Around 1973,
73.
between
Okay.
3 and 4.
So you were in your,
Probably about 27 years old when I moved here, born in 1945.
and you were coming from what part of
San
California?
Francisco.
San Francisco at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So I moved here from Las Vegas. I drove. You didn't drive here, right? You flew.
No, I flew.
How was that move? Like, what did you bring with you? Just what could fit on the flight?
Okay. Okay. If you're ready for this story, and not everybody is, I will tell the true story, not the cleaned up story of how I got here, or the idealized story, or necessarily the story you want to hear. So I went to UCLA 1963, 1964, and 65, not very enthusiastically. And it was such a huge social scene. One night in my little humble house, I threw a dinner party. Terrible cook, but I was always throwing dinner parties. I just loved it. And I was desperate in the kitchen looking for something that somebody needed. And the kitchen was pretty detached from the living room where everybody was, the dining room, living room. And there was a very, very, very good looking guy that I went to college with named Paul, no last names. He came into the kitchen, ripped my blouse open, flipped me over into this totally movie pose, and started kissing me. And then his girlfriend walked in and was like, "Pa, what are you doing?" Okay, now let's speed forward like 4 or 5 years. Kept in touch with some guys from UCLA, moved to San Francisco with the music scene. Never saw him again. And one night, I had a dream. This is a recurrent theme in my life of having these spirit sent dreams, realer than real life. And in the dream, he was in the dream saying, I live in New York now. You should come to New York. You're going to love it. It was so real and so powerful. The next morning, I called a friend of mine who had been Paul's best friend all through school. And I said, "Have you seen that guy lately? I had this wild dream." And he said, "That's funny you should ask that. He just landed in LA to come pick up his master's degree. He's been living in New York, in Manhattan."
Oh my God.
And I said, "Do me a favor." At that time, we had PSA Airlines in California. It cost $16 to buy a ticket from LA to San Francisco. It was like 1973. Give me a break here.
That's amazing.
And I said, "Buy my ticket. I'll pay you back. Fly him up here. I've got to see him." And 2 days later, we were on a plane to New York together, and we stayed together for about 12 years, 10 years, 12 years. Part of it personal, and then the last couple of years, few years, was as business partners. And we built my first business together.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that's how I got to New York.
Wow.
On a dream. I believed the dream.
That's incredible. And what was it, do you think that, like, did you always know that you wanted to be in New York?
I had come to New York on something I think they called the American Heritage Trip when I was about 12 years old. That's Mr. Fuzzy talking to me saying, "Why are you paying attention to a camera when you could be petting me?" Um, and I remember coming to New York, and it was one of those really structured trips for your school class.
Hmm.
And it was overwhelming to me. And we went to a Broadway play and we went to the Empire State Building. It was so different from Southern California, which LA did not express itself as a big city. And I lived in Beverly Hills, which was all trees and lawns and mansions. Oh, I didn't live in the mansion section. Um, so I always knew I wanted to be in fashion. The Los Angeles fashion scene just didn't seem like there was a center to it or valid.
Hmm.
Fashion magazines were just becoming really important. And they always referred to New York. So, in a way, yes, I always knew I wanted to come here. But when we landed, it was so different. I had never seen ice before.
Hmm.
It was one of the iciest, snowiest winters ever. And it just terrified me. I think I stayed indoors for 32 days or something. Um, we got a loft. So it was a giant living room. There was another room that eventually became a sewing room with a couple of professional sewers and a pattern maker. And then an upstairs loft area, which was the bedroom. Um, and was rented to us by like Maxie and Harry Schwartz, who dealt in secondhand fur coats, Jewish twin brothers from Poland. I'll never forget it. No elevator, just to walk up. But the loft itself was gorgeous. It had a giant skylight, the way I live with skylights here. It had a skylight over the bed, too. And I bought baby blue and white and pink spray paint, and I painted these fluffy white pink tinged clouds in a blue sky as the ceiling in the living room.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I did it. I had to get up on a really high ladder to do it. That scared the hell out of me. Um, but I think it would have been fine for Paul to live anywhere, but it wasn't okay for me.
Hmm.
I I wanted a space. And then interestingly enough, there was only one other tenant in the building
Oh.
who had sort of an identical loft next door, but not looking out on. I was on the corner of 6th Avenue and 14th Street, which is the meatpacking district, but it wasn't back then. And he was an artist who painted covers for like tacky pirate novels and all these romance novels. So
Okay.
he was always having these buxom models show up and get into, these costumes and be kind of wandering around in the hallway while he was setting up the paints and stuff. It was definitely an artistic
Hmm.
atmosphere and exotic.
That's amazing. I feel like mine was very different than
But
that.
that's the point, isn't
But
it?
yeah, yeah. I feel like yours is so much more artful and a lovely
Well,
story.
it was actually at a much more innocent time in our
Right,
history.
right. No, my move was rough. It was definitely tough, and I had no money. I don't know how much money you had.
No money.
I had
Like,
no
no
money.
money.
I was so broke, and it took everything we could to get the apartment that we got. And I was living with my best friend and her dog
Uh,
in a studio apartment, and it was like 150 square feet. It was tiny. Like
yeah.
the main living area was 9 feet wide. by like 13 feet long.
We had no money, and he didn't want to do anything with his MBA. So he was driving a taxi,
Oh,
and his best friend was driving a taxi. And then his best friend's sister got into that vampire soap opera, Dark Shadows. So she was contributing some money to his best friend. But they were taxi drivers at a time when the movie Taxi Driver came out. It was fraught with a lot of money shortages and what you could possibly buy to eat. And yeah, you're worried about stuff like that all the time.
Yeah. Well, in order for us to get our apartment, we had to actually have her, my best friend, her aunt and uncle, luckily have money and were willing to pay for a year of our rent up front because we couldn't prove that we made enough to get like almost anything in New York. So they paid the year up front for us and we paid them rent. And I remember at some point my friend was like, "So what happens if we're late?" And her aunt made the most serious face and said, "You won't be." And we were like,
Okay.
"Okay, got
Yeah.
it." But we had no money and it was the tiniest apartment. When we first moved in, we were just on air mattresses, twin size air mattresses. And then eventually we got bunk beds
We
because
couldn't even
it
have a
made the most
bed
sense.
because the one room that had any privacy to it was taken over by me designing
Hmm.
and pattern making and sewing
Yeah.
and stuff. So we had like just a mattress upstairs in the loft area. And I think the toughest thing for me, and wasn't it for you, because you came from Florida, I came from like the desert. Oh, I cannot believe he's doing this. My God. Come over here and get petted and let's get it over with. Yeah. Was the climate. I
Hmm.
mean, what was this?
Yeah.
It was like snow and ice storms every day and freezing. And I only had Southern California clothing. I mean, let's not even talk about the fashion of it. Let's talk about freezing to death or slipping and killing yourself when you walked outdoors. Uh, just, I don't know. The whole thing was, you have to question yourself. How strong was your motivation to be here, to go through all of this and counting pennies? And nobody would give me a job. Nobody.
What was your first job?
I knew nobody. Oh, I must have tried to use word of mouth from one person to the next who I never knew. And I almost want to say it was like auditioning as an actor. And I felt like I was auditioning for job after job. And what were you supposed to say to people? Oh, I did a hand painted pair of leather pants, bell bottoms for Rod Stewart. They looked at you like you were out of your mind. Who cares? Did you go to Parsons? Did you go to FIT? And so, no education, no professional experience, no insider, no this one and that one. Nobody who gave me any kind of valid foundation or a letter that said she's really talented. You will find, if you're listening to this and you're young or you're changing to a creative profession, that although that creative profession absolutely depends on talent, talent is the lowest rung of importance because you can't weigh it, you can't see it, you can't breathe it, you can't measure it. It is unquantifiable. And everybody in business wants something they can hold firmly in their grip. So it became apparent to me that I needed a job, and that I needed to be able to work hard enough to take that money and go buy fabric and go make clothes. And then I would take them to the East Village and try to sell them to people like, or consign them. Granny takes a trip, whatever. So it was still rock and roll people buying my clothing, but it was New York rock and roll, like the Dolls, like, different, very hard edge, way different. So I got a job, So depressing. In the old ladies' girdle department at Bloomingdale's, 4 days a week. Oh, there was I could not have felt lower and worse about my life than that. And then I got a job at Max's Kansas City as a cocktail waitress. And then, lucky me, who fell in love with me? Al Goldstein, who owned Screw Magazine, and was always saying, if you would just pose for a few pictures, do you realize how much money you could make? I just said, come on. How much more disgusting could my life be? And that was,
I probably would have
how
done
much
it.
do you really want? You must really fucking want to be in New York.
Right.
And then I saw the fashion coordinator at Bloomingdale's, and she came to rearrange the girdle department. I got an appointment with her, and then I got discovered. But it took about a year and a half. It was tough. I mean, you have to really want to be where you are, Manhattan, and want to be who you think you can be, a fashion designer, in an industry that doesn't even want to gobble you up and spit you out. They just want to swat you aside. I really wanted it.
No, I feel that. You either love it or you hate it. Like, there's not really an in-between.
And you either thrive on the energy, or the energy will burn you alive.
Yep. There is a statistic, actually, 275,000 people move to New York every year, and most of them leave within 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yep. And that makes perfect sense. Because if you don't love it and you don't really want to be here, it's just too hard. It's just too difficult of a life.
It's a harsh environment, for sure. Some people thrive on it. You know, I feel actually, if I'm driving through New York, getting someplace or back again, I love the buildings. I love the sidewalks. I love the store windows. I even like the sound of sirens. I mean, I'm a city person.
Yeah.
I just am. But this time around, living here, I now live across the street from Central Park. So there's a modicum of peace and nature and serenity mixed together that I find very appropriate for the point I'm at.
Going back to when you were still broke and first moved here, did you have a cheap meal that you was like your go-to that you would eat?
You know, it's interesting. Somebody invited me to McDonald's. And I remember thinking, well, that could be a solution. I mean, I could afford that. And had one or two bites of it and said, what the fuck is this? Like, no, I'm not eating this. I tried to learn how to cook. Every single boyfriend I have ever had, very clear to me after about 3-4 months of being with me or living with me, that was not a solution.
You will not be cooking.
Right. So it was either that they were a good cook, or at that point we could afford to go out for a meal, but it was hardly ever, for my entire life here, it was hardly ever at home. And I'm still trying to be a cook, and it's still not working, but I'm not going to stop trying. I'm just convinced it'll happen.
When I first moved here, one of the best things was I found that Gray's Papaya had a recession special, and it was 2 hot dogs and a drink for like $6.
You know what? I live near a Papaya King, and we used it all the time.
Yeah.
It was delicious.
Right?
Yeah.
It was so good. And you have whatever toppings you want on there. It's amazing.
Yeah, I used to put a lot of relish on top and a lot of mustard, and I loved it. Not healthy.
Not healthy at all. Well,
Yeah,
that was not it. You were surviving.
You were in your 20s. Your body could handle. I always used to say, oh my God, I've got a lead stomach. I can eat anything. Not true anymore.
Did you ever have anything happen that made you think about leaving New York?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so many. What I had to learn was that this is really embarrassing. He never does this when I'm not filming. He never, ever does this, talks like this. But okay, I think the worst thing was a couple of people that said they would hire me made it clear right before the hiring process happened that it was about sex. One was about me, and one was actually about Paul, who was so good looking. Yeah. I think that was such a low point. It was like my talent didn't matter, and nobody believed me, and nobody believed me for my talent.
Yeah.
And it was like, I am not gonna prostitute myself for this. I'm gonna figure out a way to make my talent come alive and be out there and work for me. But I thought about leaving. I just thought, oh my God, how much more depressing can this to be? And I thought, they used to tell stories all the time about Broadway actors who were waiters, waitresses in between, or bartenders, because you couldn't make a living doing what you were meant to do and love to do. And I really started to feel that way 24/7.
Yeah.
I pivoted around, I swiveled it around and made it work.
Yeah.
That was the hardest work of my life.
I actually used to work with a lot of people that were like off and on Broadway. At my first job in the city was at Bubba Gump's Shrimp Company, slinging shrimp, as I say, as a server. And that was, I mean, that's all it was all of these actors and singers, and they would just be like dancing and singing in the hallways. It was actually really amazing.
Wow.
I hated working at the restaurant, but I loved the people that were there. They were definitely entertaining. There was one guy I used to tell him I want him to just follow around and be like the soundtrack of my life.
Yeah, that's definitely more uplifting than my experience. That's for sure.
What experience did you have that made you say, okay, now I'm a New Yorker?
I think when I was discovered by Bloomingdale's and I burst out in tears when they gave me a $100,000 order and said, I don't have the money to fulfill this. I thought you were going to buy like 3 pieces or something. The fact that they said, you're so talented, we'll forward the money to you. We'll pay for the labor. We'll pay for the fabric.
Right.
We'll pay for the New York Times ads. At that point, fashion was really the hot ticket. It was hard work for them to find new talent. They treated me like it was a dream. Somebody finally believed in me.
Yeah.
Someone finally was going to give me my chance, and I was not going to fuck it up. I was going to take it and devote myself to it and run with it.
That's amazing. I wish that I could have lived through those times, because I feel like it was just so different than obviously my era. Of pure competition. I definitely felt the whole like, well, where did you go to college thing? And I went to like some vocational school that nobody wanted to recognize. My degree actually means nothing now. So that's a whole side note.
Perfect.
But luckily I don't need it anymore. I wish I could have been in an era where like you had more of those chances. I feel like it's so much harder to be able to have a small chance and run with it. I feel like now it's kind of, things are just set up in all of these corporations where you just have to go through the motions before you can get anywhere.
Yeah, corporations, I realized very, very young into the game of New York City, Manhattan fashion, I was not going to be able to prosper. Every time I took another step upward, I hoped, it was always with forming a new company, a new brand, and going with it. And then the one thing I really learned, which I thought was so opposite to what I had believed, is there were no women in power in fashion. Eventually Liz Claiborne, maybe Nicole Miller, but that was it. Men owned the companies. Men had the money. Men only going to respect talent if it immediately translated to dollars. That was my most important professional lesson. The minute you start making money for them, you start becoming important. Important enough to at least treat really well. I always demanded enough space around me to grow that talent without them smothering it. That was another real key.
I was smothered in fashion as well, but in a completely different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was definitely a rough road. And I think it's fashion in particular in New York is full of huge personalities, and they always want to be the one with the ideas, the one that is recognized. And so it's really hard when you're not, when you're at a lower position or you have less power than someone else, to be able to like just be heard. That's very difficult.
Because even if you have an idea that winds up making money, somebody else in the corporation, one or two steps above you, will take that idea as their own
Yep.
and take credit for it.
Yep.
And that's why I could never be in a big corporate setting.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And the other thing was just constantly realizing how ephemeral talent was. They were never going to value me the way I need. I had to work from the outside. I had to work in an underfunded, smaller venue,
Mm-hmm.
but where my talent could shine.
Right.
And I found out pretty quickly after I started designing little collections for Bloomingdale's. I came up with a blouse. It was called the Cabal blouse. And we sold like 3 or 4 million of them. And that's when I recognized therein lies my talent. I don't really know how I got there with this blouse, but I did. And that really started funding me. And I'm much better in a smaller, not layered atmosphere to get something done. And in a way, it's why I like social media so much, because you can be yourself, you can find yourself, discover who you need to be here, but you don't have to have 8 billion people sitting on top of you.
Right.
So New York City is definitely a place you come to with hopes and dreams. You don't just wander in here. And we've shared ours with you, but we'd love to hear your New York City story, your New York City ambitions, hopes, dreams. You know what? New York, New York.
All right.
Then we should do the intro.
Yep.
From that camera.
Yep.
You do the intro.
It's for you because it's going on YouTube, so
okay.
we need it from you. So what I was saying is it should be more like it's not anybody who's watched it yet. So it's completely separate from the episode. It's going to go on YouTube, and you're going to be saying, this week on 80/40, we're talking about our love of New York, blah blah blah. If you want to watch the episode, go to 80/40.
Okay. So this week on 80/40 is what I call a walk down the avenue of broken dreams. 7th Avenue, Fashion Avenue, New York City. How it was in 80/40 for me in the mid-70s. How it was for Nyna, who came here 15 years ago. And for sure the fashion industry was completely different. Join us on the 80/40 community and find out what New York, New York really means to us. And we want to know what it means to you too.